All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, I expected the fight between Florida State and Clemson against the ACC to go to distance, and all signs are pointing towards that. As this, it's kind of going to be like one of those old school Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier fights. I'm talking about the 15 round affairs, okay? And the reason why I'm bringing this up and the reason why I'm going to continue to bring this up is because there is a lot riding on the outcome of Florida State and Clemson looking to get out of their grant of rights with the ACC, okay? And at the ACC Media Days, League Commissioner Jim Phillips dug in and said that the conference would fight the lawsuits from both Florida State and Clemson for as long as it takes. The ACC, they are sticking to their guns and they are sticking to by their grants of rights, which all members sign. And it's also what Clemson and Florida State are seeking to get out of. This battle has already gone to the courts, and it's only going to get worse and a lot worse before it gets better. Now, Florida State and Clemson, they are looking at the money that the schools in the Big Ten and SEC are getting, which is the center point of everything. Don't expect Florida State and Clemson to leave the ACC before 2026. The deadline for them to give in that notice is going to be in a few weeks. And hey, I'm not surprised. Okay, I didn't expect it to happen. This is going to be a process. It's not going to be a snap of the finger where you're going to say, "Hey, Florida State and Clemson are leaving." I'm going to touch on that a little bit more in a moment. Now, one would believe, okay, that Florida State wants to either go to the Big Ten or the SEC, but the either of those college football superpower conferences want the Knowles. On the surface, they're saying no, but could things change? Possibly. I'll tell you like this. It's right now, it's not just on the surface uh, that, the SEC and the Big Ten are saying no about Florida State, but also, from within those respective conferences, it doesn't appear that neither league is going to be gung ho to add Florida State and Clemson yet. And I'm going to touch on that in a moment again as well. But Florida State's move and Clemson's move, along with that of the fate of the Pac-2, Washington State and Oregon State, are going to be the next big dominoes to fall in college football as these decisions, regardless of which way that they go, could easily impact about 75 schools. Okay. But for me, it's this: you look at it and you say, hey, Florida State, Clemson, they want that SEC Big Ten money. Uh, that right there, to me, it comes down to whether the networks are going to be willing to pony up the bread, more notably an ESPN or CBS or an NBC or Fox for Florida State, and then do the schools in either the Big Ten or the SEC want to share that pot with Florida State and Clemson? It's one of those where you've heard about it. Florida really doesn't want Florida State in the SEC. And I'll tell you like this, I know like there people are bringing up, the Big 12 as a possibility for Clemson and Florida State. For me, it's one of those where at this point, and I think it's only a matter of time before both the Big 10 and SEC do get to 20. But at this point, it looks like at least that we're not going to see that unless the ACC completely falls apart. And things would, of course, go south for the Atlantic Coast Conference if and when Florida State and Clemson are able to get out of the league, because I really don't see a scenario happening where within 5 years, or at least by the end of this decade, we're talking about Florida State and Clemson as members of the Atlantic Coast Conference. I simply do not see it happening. With that said, I think what would happen at this point, we could see both the Big Ten and SEC coming in, kind of like what happened with the Pac-12 last year, where they're kind of like just picking over the remains and kind of like cherry picking who they want and who they don't want for their respective leagues. And then from there, maybe the ACC would look to try to, hold on somehow, and or maybe teams go to the Big 12. We have to wait and see. But nonetheless, again, there is a lot riding on the outcome of things. So for me, how soon before this gets resolved? I don't see it happening anytime soon, because there are going to be court cases, plural. You've already got Florida State and Clemson each challenging the ACC in court. You also have the ACC clapping back at both Florida State and Clemson in court. And I guarantee you, regardless of the outcome, there's going to be appeals, plural. So this ain't going to be resolved anytime soon. There's going to have to be money that's going to have to be exchanged for Florida State and Clemson to get out of the ACC. And if you're the lawyers on both sides, you're more than happy, because you are racking up those retainer fees right now as we speak. So for Clemson and Florida State and the ACC as a whole, will this be a distraction going forward? I don't think so, because it's one of those where it's not going to affect the kids, at least right now, in my opinion, that are out there competing, whether it's football, basketball, or baseball. Because at the end of the day, when this gets done, most of the kids that are playing, for these schools and then playing in this conference, for the most part, it's not going to affect them, because by the time this whatever happens, whatever it comes down the pike, they're going to be moved on, whether they graduated in the pros, whatever. So it's not going to affect them, coaches and stuff like that. I don't think it affects them, short term. I think everybody is able to go out there and handle their business, but people are going to be talking about it because it's something that's important. And there are some people, myself included, that think that the ACC could be the next power conference to fall by the wayside. The ACC is not going down without a fight, nonetheless. And like I said before, this is truly indeed a fight that is and will go the distance. Like I've said before, I'll say it again, and I will continue to say it. This is what happens when the money's not equal. Okay. This is why we saw USC and UCLA want to go to the Big Ten. Why? Because they're looking at some of those non heavyweights that are in the Big Ten that are getting more money than them, or were getting more money than them. The same thing for the likes of a Texas and an Oklahoma going to the SEC. Okay. These other schools are going to sit back and say, well, wait a minute. I'm a powerhouse in football. And I know that, you can sit from the outside looking in and say, hey, well, you're getting $30 million a year per school per your conference. But they're looking at it and saying, well, if this school over here in this league's getting 50 or $60 million, I want a piece of that as well. And this is what happens, okay, when the money ain't equal. And I've been talking about this for the longest time. This is what happens when you don't have a college football commissioner. This is what happens when you don't have revenue sharing. And this is what happens when you don't have a semblance of order. And even when it's all said and done, hypothetically talking about a college football commissioner and revenue sharing, I highly doubt that that would ever happen, because good luck getting school administrators and athletic directors to share the pot with with a school that really doesn't, affect them. Okay, because if you're a school president, if you're an AD or whoever, your job is to your school. Your job is to bring in the funds for your school. You're not going to go out there and try to help, a school in a different conference 4 or 5 states away. It's just the nature of the business. But with that said, this is what happens when everybody is not on equal footing. You look at it for Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC. Like I said, this ain't going away no time soon. It's going to be talked about during the upcoming college football season. It's probably going to be talked about next off season as well. It's again, this is an important matter, at least to collegiate athletics, because again, like I said, there's a lot of schools that are going to be affected by this, just like what happens with the Pac-2, whether or not they, team up with the Mountain West. That's going to affect things out there. Whether they end up in possibly in the Big 12, rebuilding the Pac 12, we don't know. And it's the same thing for the ACC, because I guarantee you, if Florida State and Clemson do leave, the ACC is probably going to bring in maybe some more schools from the American Conference, and maybe the Americans going to try to pluck some schools from some other conferences as well as they look to hang on. So, like I said, this is an important decision that is going to affect a lot of schools across the country. So, when it's all said and done, this is going to be a battle. It ain't going away. Jim Phillips is sticking to his guns, and he's saying, listen, you guys signed this paper. And Florida State and Clemson, they're looking at the money from the Big Ten and the SEC. They feel like they found a way, both of them, to get out of this grants of rights. So, like I said, let's see what's going to happen. But like I said, buckle up, because this battle ain't going away anytime soon. It's going to be a slugfest. There's going to be a lot of black and blue eyes, theoretically, in the court world. But nonetheless, let's see how long it takes, because it's going to happen. But let's see how long it takes for Florida State and Clemson to get out of the ACC here. And again, they can try to get out of the ACC, but they might not get what they want, at least for right now. But let's see if the Big Ten and the SEC change their tune, and maybe the Big 12 could be an option for them. But nonetheless, this is a battle of all battles for college football, and August ain't even here yet. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.